Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beat Around the Blockchain. Appreciate you jumping in for episode 13 now. We got a big year coming up. And to kick it off for the first episode of this year, we have somebody that most of this community knows, most of the people watching know. But if you don't know, he is known as Heartstripper number 7. You'll hear him referred to as Jeremy Knows, but I know him as now Jeremy is it Jannielli.
It's a ha still.
Jannielli.
Yep.
And I've been working on that. And he's a close friend of mine. I've been a part of his journey since he launched the first Instagram page for Veefriends. He's very integrated in the Veefriends community, and community is going to be a big part of what we talk about today with none other than Jeremy Knows. So, Jeremy, how are you doing?
Okay, well, I'm so happy to be here. Lucky number 13. I feel like there's some good juju around that. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
I know we're gonna go all over the place because, like you said, you've seen the entire progression, the post fast and fail faster method, and also like the community has changed like at least half a dozen times since the project first launched. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. When prepping for this call, it was a big question mark of where do we start? You know, there's so many places we can dive into, so many directions we can take this conversation. A big part of it will be kind of on the spot. We'll see how things flow. But where I want to start, you know, because you've been in some interesting careers prior to what you're doing now. And so my question to you is like, why did you decide that Veefriends was going to be the community that you wanted to take your first step into this world? Like, how did you find Veefriends? And why did you decide, like, okay, I want to make this Instagram page as, like, my first step into starting to hang out with this community and contribute?
It's a great question. I will say I feel more like Veefriends chose me rather than I chose Veefriends. So to like really truncate the story, I was informed of Gary Vee's NFT mint about a week before May 5th, which was the original mint day. It was then delayed until May 11th. So on May 4th, I was ready to mint a Gary Vee NFT. Like, Veefriends did not exist. And I was very, like, kind of precious about my ETH. Like, at that time, I had 1.5 ETH. And Gary had told us have 0.5 to 1 ETH. So I loaned half an ETH to my friend who told me about the mint so we could both get in. I was about to spend like all my ETH on this, which I had accumulated $10 at a time for the last 5 months. So I was doing that because I received more than the like $3,000 to $4,000 of value of Ethereum I was holding from Gary's content. You know, in short, like the whole conversation about compassion, self-awareness, entrepreneurial tendencies versus being a true blood entrepreneur really like shook me out of a bullshit phase in my early 20s. And even more powerful than that, you've probably seen the content where he says regret is poison, and he will encourage people to go to old folks' homes and volunteer and see what regret actually looks like. I had been meaning to like take some time to go see my grandfather. He was 93 at the time. My grandmother had passed away 3 years prior. My grandmother actually passed away the morning that I left on my first theater tour. I was doing a West Coast tour with a new company I was working for. And like that was really devastating because I hadn't seen her in a while. So like over those 2 or 3 years, I was like, I really need to get to Michigan and see my grandfather. I really need to do that. And it was Gary's content that like caused me to pull the trigger. Like I finished my contract, I canceled the next, and I took 2.5 weeks to just sit with my grandfather in Michigan and, you know, talk about the war and make eggs and drink wine. And like, he was so confused. You know, I was like 26 or 27. He was like, don't you have better things to do? And I was like, no, I really don't. And that is like to this day one of like my most proud moments. And it was made even more powerful when he passed away just like 6 months later. Like, I was of the mind that, like, that was so fun. Like, I can't wait to do that again. And by the end of the year, he was gone. So that was truly invaluable. And I was going into a Gary V NFT thinking, I'm going to support you in your new venture. You're saying this is like your thing. You're going to build this for the rest of your life. This matters. I'll support you. Then on May 5th, and like the evening before, Gary was like, tech isn't ready. I don't want to launch yet. It's going to be delayed. But they stuck to their press schedule. So they released the website. They released the Instagram with images of all 268 characters. And Gary was on like Good Morning America and Bankless and like all day talking about this. So just in case they like figured out the launch, I was ready to mint that morning. And so I watched Gary go through this press circuit. I was in the Discord, 8 a.m., ready to go. And I saw Veefriends, and I was like, this makes a lot of sense to me because I'm a theater actor. So, like, I understand how, in some fashion, like, we all carry forward a persona, and we usually fall into various archetypes. You know, we might be the lover, the parent, the child, the brother. Like, we all have these modalities. And so this was just, like, modalities of emotional attributes instead of, like, story archetypes that I was familiar with. And I was like, you can put reliable rat and empathy elephant together 100 different ways and tell 100 different stories. And so I see how this can iterate over the years. And yeah, I was a Gary Vee fan. Like, I wasn't a maxi, but like I believed in his ability to build the business. And then the last piece was, because the mint didn't happen, I had time to look at everything, and there was the Sorcerer Scholarship, which as I talk about it more, I find like is like really forgotten in the Veefriends community. It was 5 one-of-one tokens, provided access to Gary, internship at VaynerMedia, 40 hours with his executive staff, and 5 sessions with him and the other sorcerers. So my mind was like, if I can work for this and get it for free, I'd much rather do that than spend $2,000. Because ETH was on a tear at the time. ETH literally hit all-time highs that 6 days later, the day that Veefriends finally minted.
Yep.
And so I just started. I literally just started. It wasn't really, I had no idea it would last this long or that it would go in this way. But I knew that I wasn't going to just stand out by putting in any old application. I assumed it was going to be content-based. I started a email, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, added to my bio the first ever Veefriends account because I launched it within an hour of the website going live. It was that fast.
And then I just gave myself Veefriend.
Want to be a Veefriend. And somehow that popped into my mind. I was like, that's good enough. It rolls off the tongue. Like, trying to follow Gary is like, don't judge yourself. Like, you don't judge what is good content. And like follow the 64 pieces of content a day model as best as I can. And I thought that I was going to make a really badass social media resume. Like, I was going to make content about myself, about the work that I've done, the reasons why I would be good and provide value in this role. And by the end of that day, I realized that was of value to no one but myself. And that the real Gary Vee way would be to provide value to the Veefriends community. And at that time, people didn't know how to use their MetaMask. We didn't even know when the mint date was because it was all subject to tech development. So I became, the first one. There were like half a dozen people at that beginning that were like curating content around what is Veefriends, how can you get it, why should you get it, and then like I literally just followed the breadcrumbs from there.
Here's the thing I want to point out. Like, throughout that conversation, you mentioned a couple of things. Like, one, going to see, well, you said it was grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
You thought about, okay, what's the Gary Vee way? You started creating content. You followed his content plan that he's put out for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every single one of these things, what it has in common is you took action. You didn't just consume his content, you acted on the content, right? You heard something, it resonated with what your goals were. You're like, okay, let's try this. Let's just put something into action. I have no idea where this is going to go, what it's going to lead to, but I think this is right. It feels right. And
Yeah.
I'm not just going to think about doing it. I'm just going to do it and not overthink it. You know, I'm not going to overthink the handle and what the website's going to be and what the content's going to consist of. I'm just going to go and start putting stuff out there and see what happens. And that's something that, like, that's the bridge that you made that I'm sure so many people had similar thoughts and ideas and ambitions, but didn't act on them. Right. And there's a
to your point, I assumed that a lot more people would be in that race. Like, there were a lot of people who were actively seeking out the Sorcerer Scholarship, but it seemed to me like a no-brainer to, like, kind of beat Gary at his own game.
But that's scary to most people, right? Most
terrifying.
people think, like, when people are starting businesses, they're like, oh, there's so many people that probably thought of this idea or working on this idea. Like, I've even had those thoughts, and it stopped me in the past. And I know it stops endless amounts of people because they're like, oh, I can't compete. You know, you get this imposter syndrome. So why did you do it? Like, what made you, like, take it past that? Because I'm sure those thoughts went through your head.
That's a great question. I think there was kind of like a perfect scenario in which, firstly, like, I believed I could do it. Like, one of my very first Instagram posts is me sort of having the self-awareness to say there's only so many ways that this goes. Either I stay consistent, I impress a ton of people, I get Gary's attention, I win the scholarship in a few months. That's the least likely scenario. Or I stay consistent, I do, or well, there's a zero scenario where I just give up really quickly. But, like, assuming consistency, I impress a lot of people and Gary sees my potential, but chooses not to give me the scholarship. And at that point, I have a crossroad decision. Do I keep going? Or do I call it, like, a fun chapter? And for various reasons, mostly related to the community, I had already decided I was going to keep going regardless of the scholarship. I was meeting people like you, tons of, like, kind, industrious, resourceful, you know, really intelligent, helpful, generous people. And I knew that every day I was making content, I was improving my eventual experience at VCon, because I ended up minting my Heart Trooper, so I didn't need this Sorcerer Scholarship to, like, be in the community,
in the Veefriends,
you know. And I honestly foresaw, I think it's written in that post, like, I foresaw that the most likely scenario was I have the capacity to do this. Like, I'm an extrovert. I'm a storyteller. I know I can make content, but I was always afraid and struggled to do it for myself. It was so much easier for me to talk about something else, support other people's needs, and talk about an idea rather than, like, my own personal ambitions. And that I would eventually, like, not get the scholarship, but decide to continue, and then be in this long patience game of, like, kind of, somebody described it to me as mid-level grinding. You know, when you've, like, gone through, it's like in a video game, you've gone through, like, the first half of the game and you know the end is near, but you want to, like, do all the side quests and, like, get the best armor and the best weapon and, like, get it as fortified as you can before you get to that next chapter mark where you probably can't turn back. You go to, like, the enemy's castle and, like, the rest of the story happens there. Yeah. Like, that's where I'm at now. I'm, like, mid-level grinding. I'm, like, finding my way. I'm, like, considering sponsors. I'm trying to improve my content schedule. And yeah, I just have to be patient until which point I think the crossroads now, you know, because I am very committed to doing this, is either I become indispensable to Veefriends and they eventually bring me on, which is, like, very much my ambition, or it takes a lot longer than, you know, I would like, and I do detours. I work for other Web3 companies, and I, like, find my way elsewhere.
This is kind of
So the answer to your question is, like, I believed I could do it. Mm-hmm. And the perfect storm was I also was an unemployed actor who had just taken a job at a restaurant. So I had my cash flow, and I had my mornings and evenings to do the side hustle the way Gary always talks about. And I was crazy enough to think that I was capable.
It's always the crazy ones. I love it. I'm curious because the way that the Veefriends Mint happened was very different than most of the project launches at the time, in the sense that most of them were you would mint something, you'd get some kind of pre-reveal, and then you would get something random. Like, you didn't get to choose. But Gary decided, I'm going to show you everything that's available, and I want you to pick.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of opportunity for being intentional with the characters that you chose. So when it comes to Veefriends and people who've minted it, I love to ask, like, was there intention behind, for you, choosing the Heart Trooper, and what was that intention? Like, why was that the character that resonated with you in some way, shape, or form that made you say, this is where I want to, like, place this ETH?
Yeah, so a little more context. By the time Mint came around a week later, we were a band of 3, and my friends Tyler and Alex both had to work on the day of the mint, and so I was entrusted to mint on their behalf. And I had also immersed myself in Veefriends for the last 6 days, so I knew what was going on. Like, I'd studied the characters more than most. And I was watching the Dutch auction like anybody else. You know, I went to sleep that night, like, afraid it was going to sell out, and I ended up minting all of our Veefriends just under 1 ETH before the floor hit on the very first day.
Yeah, I did too.
I was kind of like watching, you know, like, I was looking basically for the volume spike, you know, because I overestimated it. I thought this was just gonna, like, sell out day one,
right?
As many of us did, you know, like, there's people who minted gift goats at 14 ETH, you know, as soon as they hit the market, you know, even though 90% of them hit 5 ETH, so that's life. You know, like, I ended up minting my Heart Trooper for an ETH, but I could have, if I would have waited, I could have gotten a rare one for the same price. The reason I minted the Heart Trooper is because I was torn between a handful of characters: the Heart Trooper, the Harpic, the Sensible Sommelier, the Willful Wizard, the Focus Falcon, and the Fuck You Monday Mole. And ultimately, I pretty much narrowed it down to the Sommelier and the Heart Trooper. And I got the Wizard for Alex and the Falcon for Tyler. Eventually I did. I got mine first. So the first NFT I ever minted was this Heart Trooper. And I guess somehow, like, not so, like, logically, I just realized that getting the Sommelier was playing into Gary's future in Veefriends, and Heart Trooper was playing into my future in Veefriends. Because before all this, I was a performance artist and a clown, and I know people hear clown and they think about a lot of various things that have nothing to do with what I do. You know, they think about the circus, they think about they think about kids' birthday parties. I did work in kids' birthday parties for about a decade, but not as a clown. Never as a clown. As a clown, I did street art and I did, like, person-to-person improvisation. So I view what I do as a clown as very much an exercise in, like, opening the heart and, like, revealing the joy and play that is inherent in all humans. And so I don't know if Gary had shared that the Heart Trooper was kind of like a kind iteration on Stormtrooper at that time, but I saw it as, like, a Heart Trooper, somebody who, like, leads with an open heart. And so I identified with that.
No, I love that. And it's, everyone I've asked, I've gotten very similar stories. I have a similar one for me, and, like, there's in the sense that there's very much intention behind why I got it, why it resonated with me. You know, I went back and looked like 6 months after the mint. I was looking through. I had screenshots of every single one I was interested in. 'Cause, like, I gotta be able to funnel these somehow. And I would go back and, like, what were the screenshots of, like, what were the ones I almost chose or were in my, like, pick of the litter. And the number one I wanted was the Adventurous Astronaut. But that actually, I think all of them...
That one sold out.
All of them sold out at, like, 2.5 ETH, like, almost immediately. Right?
Yep.
Like, those were gone. But one of them was... I'm trying to think. One of them was Empathy Elephant. I liked the Harpic. I had the Sommelier and Last Glass Standing because I'm a big wine guy. And there was a couple other ones. I think Motivated Monster was another one. That was, like... These are, like, the top characters that would have been great, to choose right from the get-go. But at the end of the day, I didn't pick because, like, this was my first NFT mint as well. I didn't buy it even knowing you could make money with this stuff. I bought it because the exact same, like, I'm going to stitch what I said in my podcast with Andy Kranak. because I said that I chose to mint Veefriends because Gary's never once asked me for anything, and he's done nothing but give me extensive value for years that I've been able to like internalize and act on. And like the least I can do is support what he's doing in building. And even that is like semi-selfish because I still get 3 years of a conference out of it. And as somebody who loves to network and meet new people that are like-minded and into this stuff, that I can brainstorm with and just enjoy their company, it's like that's guaranteed 3 years of getting to go. Absolutely. Like this wasn't about a flip. Again, like I didn't even know you could do that with this stuff. So,
dude,
no,
I recognize all of that so much. It just like runs really deep. I saw a statistic this week that 70% of Veefriends NFT holders have not ever traded their Veefriend.
like our OG holders.
Wow. I think it includes Series 1 and Series 2, not book games. But Veefriends, more than any other collection, has not traded their NFTs, has held their NFTs since mint. And, you know, like there's something very powerful in that conviction. And I would say an unknown portion of that conviction is just like not like people not paying attention. Like we're in this day in, day out. Like I'm hosting spaces, I'm talking to the community, I'm making content. We hear about every little like blip of criticism and praise. But there's like a whole other segment of the Veefriends community that doesn't check in except for when they need to get to VCon. And is just in for the 45-year ride that they signed up for. The same way that like it wasn't about a flip. Like the reason I ultimately bought my heart pick was because I wanted to participate in that. I saw everybody making money, and I was like, "Shoot, I can't sell my heart trooper. I'm gonna have to get another one." You know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. Like, I was having some conversations about that specifically. Like, obviously there's like existential circumstances where like, okay, I need to sell my dolphin, right? But outside of that, like I'm gonna fight tooth and nail to find another way because it like means so much to me, and I have so much conviction in this. And you're familiar with Flexi and all of their products. I have one behind me right here. But it was an interesting conversation where I was like, even just putting it on display like this, like I feel like I can't sell it now. Like it's almost like in my head, it's almost a part of that identity. Right? Sure. In the same way, like the Heart Trooper is a part of your identity. You literally introduce yourself on your podcast every single time as Heart Trooper number 7, right? So what happens if you can't do that anymore? It's like it feels like something's missing. And
there was a moment where I thought about if I sold a Heart Trooper, I would just start to introduce myself as Heart Pick number 1. I didn't do that, but it's worth mentioning that like we can do hard things, you know, whether it's like a dire situation or maybe you just have an opportunity that you don't want to pass up. I hope I never have to sell my Heart Trooper, but like at the end of the day, I think it's also we write the legacy, right? So if my Heart Trooper ever trades, it'll always be my Heart Trooper, or will have been my Heart Trooper, you know?
Yeah, it's documented.
But it's documented. It's on the blockchain.
Yeah. No, love that. Well, cool. Let's dive into post mint. You started this channel. You're creating content. What were some of those early challenges that you faced, maybe that we didn't get to see from a community perspective, when it came to whether it was like imposter syndrome or it was lack of like figuring out what direction you want to take your content, because everyone's kind of experimenting early on of like trying to find your voice. I know I've gone through that, still going through that in certain circumstances. So like, what was that first 2, 3, 4, 6 months of being Jeremy Knows like for you?
It was a lot of fun. I'm like trying to think of like some of like the obstacles and the negative things. Like I also got a lot of hate being a Gary V Veefriends fan page. A lot, like I don't know. every week somebody would come out and be like, delete your profile. I remember the first person who told me to delete my profile, I posted on my stories, and I was like, I think I'm onto something, you know. One of the hardest things that the community ever saw was explaining it to my wife Haley, and like kind of that transition of this new thing requiring so much of my attention, and like not being able to really tangibly explain why, even though there's no guarantee of a reward, this time is worthwhile. Because, you know, I was waking up early and staying up late to post content. Like, I would get into bed and then stay on my phone, like, replying to every comment until I fell asleep. As far as, like, posting the content, you know, it was awkward, but I try to use that to my advantage. Like, my very first TikToks are me just, like, playing with filters and being like, I'm really bad at this. Post, you know. You know, same for Instagram. At one point, I'm a relatively good writer, so that came to my strength. You know, taking screenshots from Discord, adding context, mostly just like posting updates. Like most of what people rely on me for is updates and announcements. Like the Veefriends Alpha or NFT Alpha and some of the other stuff really came later. But one thing that really set me off was there was so much to report on that it wouldn't fit in a caption. Like I hit the character limit and I was like, oh shit. So I went live on Instagram, and you know, there was like 1 or 2 people watching, and it was really awkward, and I was talking to myself. Shout out to Choopy Doodles, who hung out with me in one of my very first live streams. And at some point in like one of my very first lives, like first 5 live streams, someone in the chat was like, you're so much fun, I want to do a live stream with you. And I was like, okay, let's do it. We scheduled it for after work the next day, and she like told me her whole life story and like her journey to getting to be friends, and it was very inspiring, and it made other people watching want to join as well. I remember somebody in the chat saying, you should do this 24/7. And so that became a staple that really like, it was like the first content pillar was the community chat, where thanks to CryptoCam, who runs the Veefriends Family Tree account, he was scheduling people for me to interview for like an hour face-to-face on Instagram, and I would post it raw. You know, this was before we had a podcast, and this was well before I was thinking anything about strategically what to do with the account. Like a lot of people messaged me, they're like, what's your goal? Like, what are you trying to do? And I was like, I'm literally just following my nose. I'm trying to provide value. I'm seeking out people who need help. There was a bit of an imposter syndrome, I suppose. It was weird to like kind of feel a certain power in myself and know that I knew most of what there was to know about Veefriends, and be in a room and like, you know, being the kind of like eager eagle and being like, oh, you have a Veefriends question? Yeah, I got the answer. You know, now everybody tags me because they know that I follow this stuff. But going around clubhouses and being on Twitter, I was just like the nosy guy who like some random Twitter account asked a question about Veefriends, and I was like, Veefriends didn't respond. I was there, and I was like, as far as I know, it's this. And doing that 100 times over. So kind of, you know, getting over that friction of like unsolicited advice, I guess, was a little bit of a hurdle, but it faded very quickly. And then like Gary always talks about, like, give people more of what they want. People love the community chats. People love the Discord updates. People couldn't watch the Instagram lives and multitask, so we made a podcast. You know, and it just all sort of unfolded from there.
Yeah, one of the things I love that you do is you do a live and your live is you recording your podcast. So some people can tune in right then and there, and they can even contribute sometimes to the podcast itself. And you record it, and then for people who didn't make it, you post it on your podcast. And it's kind of like it's a really smart content strategy from a time perspective or time management,
Yes.
because you're knocking out multiple things. You're everywhere all at once. In the same way of like, let's create long form, and then I no longer have to record. That gets me 5-10 pieces of content that I can put everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And it's Gary's content strategy. How can you be smart about and strategic about how you're doing this and managing your time? And you put in a lot of time into this stuff.
Yeah, it's true. And not to mention the half a dozen times that either my podcast recorder or my Instagram feed failed and I had the backup. Because that's the worst. When you put in the time, like, I don't rehearse the podcast. I make a little outline. I look for, like, the most relevant things, and I wing it. But winging it the second time is never as good. You know? It's this very weird thing, and, like, part of it is because I'm an improviser and I like that gear. But I find that, like, the first messy version is usually better than the second or third take. And to, like, really rehearse and refine, you have to really rehearse. You know, it's like it takes a few iterations, because you're this is not just about content. Like, this happens when people are, like, working on their business pitch, or, like, trying to make their mission and purpose, like, roll off their tongue in an authentic way. You want to, like, imitate what worked in the past. You want to, like, emulate what you felt was authentic, instead of being actually in the moment and reacting to what is happening right now. Like, actors fall into this trap all the time. Like, they do a great performance, and then the next performance they try to, like, create that instead of working with the chemicals and the energy and emotions that they have that night.
No, and I think there's so much power in that. I think there's an importance to, in some aspects, to have preparation, but I think it's very much easy to over-prepare to the point where you end up, like, stumbling over yourself, because you know what you're trying to say and what you practiced, or what you practice doing, and then when you're focused on that, you're not present, and you end up doing worse because you're not there in the moment, right? And it's the same, I mean, whether it's in, like, what I do for business, or it's even on these podcasts, I have kind of an outline of things to hit on, so we don't run out of things to talk about, which you and I never do. Right. But I'd still try to keep the conversation going and leverage just, I mean, actually talking to you as a human, being authentic, active listening. Like, let me respond to what you're saying, not just, oh, hey, next question, because nobody wants to listen to that.
Yeah, and I totally agree. That's why when I interviewed Gary, I had my list of rapid fires, because I was like, I want answers to these questions, but I'm not gonna, like, strong arm you into, like, I'm not gonna lead the conversation, because, like, you're the guy. Like, whatever you want to talk about is probably, like, important today, but also, like, let's talk about book games. Let's talk about this. You know?
And rapid fires, you can try and sneak some stuff out of.
Yes. I've played that card a couple times now, though, so I feel like I don't think they fall for it anymore. They know it's coming from me.
In a recent Spaces that Andy Kranick was on, he was very, like, mindful about the things he was saying, because like, everything's hush hush right now, and, like, not announced, which is interesting. But we were, like, grilling him, and it was he had all of the, like, avoidance answers,
the company line answers. Yeah, he's media trained. He knows what's up.
Oh yeah, for a while now.
Yeah, I need to take a course on that, because, like, I know that there's, like, a tenet that is, like, the answer is you never answer the question.
Yeah.
When you're asked about something you know you're not supposed to answer, you, like, talk about how excited you are, and, like, what like how the values are gonna be expressed, and, like, all these things, and, like, I don't have to bother with that.
Yeah. In sales training, you get a lot of, like, that indirectly. You have to navigate conversations very strategically at times when you get, like, hard pressed on certain things, and it's not in, like, a car salesman sketchy way, but just making sure that you're not saying you have to say things in the right way so that it doesn't, like, it invokes certain emotions versus others.
Totally. And honestly, like, kudos to the Veefriends team, because as much as people say they want to know what's happening, there's a degree to which they'd rather not.
Yeah. I think it's important that we don't know everything that's going on, because, I mean, communities right now are, like, incredibly emotional. right? And they react emotionally. And if we, if you
Yeah.
understand what goes on behind the scenes in business, and if we saw every single thing that happened, imagine if we heard every single detail about what happened and didn't happen with the Snoop collab, right? We'd be
Right.
all over the place. And Gary's just I'm not going to say anything until it's ready. And occasionally I'll let you know, hey, we're still working on it. It's not off the table yet, but I'll let you know when it's going to be ready.
Yeah.
We can't hear every text that he sends him and every meeting that gets canceled, and we're just going on this emotional roller coaster. We're not built for that as a community, right? And Gary is. And so he's kind of shielding us from that. So we just see the things come to fruition at the pace that it ends up coming to fruition. And I think that's important.
But do you want to know the twists and turns of the Snoop collab? Do you want to know? You don't want to know why it was so delayed? Well, Gary kind of let some go recently. Essentially, what happened was it was in the works. They were talking about it, and backstage with the team, between Gary and Veefriends and the Snoop Dogg team, they were like, "Yeah, we think we can make a fall launch work." And so that's what he was out there armed with, and that's what he told us. They didn't want to promise anything. I think what we got was we're being thoughtful, we're thinking access, and Snoop Dogg and Veefriends is happening, and then Snoop's like DOGG friends, and he says late spring fall. Mm-hmm. 2 weeks later, Snoop Dogg gets a call from Dr. Dre saying that he wants to do an album, and the way that Gary put it was Snoop doesn't even remember who I am at that point. That is for sure going to be his priority.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of the main catalyst of the delays. Then you have another factor, which is some tech divergence between what can be delivered. And, we don't know if this is a PFP or a metaverse-related thing or a music NFT or something related to Death Row Records. This could go in any direction. And there's a great product that they're happy with, but there's a supreme product that requires some tech innovation. And previously Gary was we figured it out, we're going for that supreme one, so it's delaying a bit. And then most recently he was we're still trying to figure this out, so if it doesn't work, we'll still go with the thing that we're really proud of, but we're trying to make this thing happen.
Yeah.
And then the third complicating factor is Snoop Dogg's a really busy guy. Just syncing up between the Snoop camp and the Veefriends camp is hard. Gary has a lot of pull, but it's not he can't make choices for other people. So I guess, he and the team had calls with Snoop in Miami, so in December, recently in January, and then they have a face-to-face on February 5th. So I think mid to late February is when we get the information, and probably the project drops before the VCon airdrop, which is roughly late March. That's not confirmed late March, but last year it was March 22, and it was the equivalent duration from airdrop to VCon because it's happening on that same weekend. So I think they want to give people as much time as possible, but they did say end of Q1, which is right in that range.
Okay, awesome. We'll keep our eyes out open.
Yeah. A little Jeremy Knows update here on the podcast.
For sure. I appreciate it. One thing I want to know about, we were talking about some of your initial hurdles and challenges and the way that you were kind of thinking through the initial phases of Jeremy Knows. One of the first big things that I think was a big validator and where a lot of people heard about you and what was going on was the Christie's auction. That was where I realized, this dude's actually building a community here. It's been going on behind the scenes, and they did something massive. That is absolutely insane. So tell me a little bit about what was going on, how that all started, and ultimately came to fruition. And then before we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about VDAO also. I figured it's a good transition.
Yeah, that day completely changed my life. Period. End of story. It's very interesting because just before that happened, I got the final decline from the Sorcerer Scholarship saga, And even though I had already determined I would keep going, that was like, that was a good day. I was hoping it would be a great day, but it was like, okay, that's what I expected. But I still had my hopes.
Sure.
So the Christie saga, I had no idea what I was getting into. Essentially, there was an announcement that Gary was really excited about. It was so meaningful to him. And so naturally, I was live on Twitch. We had the community, and there was this mix-up with the link. So everybody was crazy in Discord trying to figure out where it was streaming, and we ended up figuring it out. And somebody posted my Twitch in the Discord, and like that, 400 people jumped into my Twitch, which, for context, like previously maxed at like 50. So it was like huge influx of Veefriends. It was like, oh my gosh, hey guys, I make content about Veefriends all the time. Yeah, come on, hang around. What do you think about Christy? Yep. So it happens, and there's 5 artworks going to Christie's, and I'm with KCCO Eric on stream. We're just talking about it. We're kind of shooting the shit. We're like, how much do you think these things are going to go for? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, this is considered fine art now. Where are we going? And on that stream, I sent a tweet that said, here's a wild idea. What if we all put a little money together and try to make a community bid at Christie's, like a solid 6-figure bid?
Wait, so this wasn't pre-planned. This was spontaneous, like while you were watching the live stream.
Yes. Because Eric and I actually landed on the eventual closing price of the gorilla. Like, we were throwing around, we threw around a lot of numbers, so we guessed many times, but we really thought it would be like $200 to $250K, and we ended up paying $200, $250,000 after fees. So to cut to the chase a little bit, that tweet got a lot of attention, and people were interested in like how that could go through. We were holding a Twitter Spaces and whatnot. A developer named Crypto Jesus reached out and he said, if you're serious about this, I'll do the smart contract for free. And we were actually looking at doing like a formal DAO contract on chain, a situation where you would send ETH and you would get returned like a DAO token for governance. And he took me on a crash course about DAOs. And from that day for the next 2 weeks, we met every single day in my Discord in the voice chat for an hour to like work out the kinks. Because, just none of us had any idea what we were doing. Like, I knew it needed to be on chain because I didn't want to be entrusted with people just sending me their money. Yeah. But I also didn't understand, like, the legal ramifications, the tax implications, like, the liability and everything else. So, we got together one day. We're like, this was really good. We should do this every day. The next day, we were running up against a lot of legal questions. We're like, is anybody here an attorney? Crickets. They're like, okay, we're going to end the meeting early. Everybody do your best to bring an attorney the next day. The next day we had 3 attorneys in the room, which is like just a testament to like how powerful and ambitious this community is. And they sort of straightened us out. They were like, look, Christie's isn't going to let you bid as a DAO, but you can do this. You don't need a contract. You can do it with a multi-sig wallet. And, these are the kind of things that like I can't legally advise you, but this is what I would recommend. We spent the next 2 weeks kind of like making sure there was a format that was legally advisable. We had to KYC everybody. And for 5 days, we opened up the vault and raised 140 ETH, which at the time was $400,000. So I guess there's one more leg in the journey, which is like we were keeping a spreadsheet of what people thought they would contribute, but it wasn't real until it was in the vault. And we had like 10, even 15 ETH, and we're like, this is really great. This is not like a winning bid. And then there were a couple whales in the community who started to support the effort and contributed to the DAO themselves, but also said, hey, I'm probably going to bid in this auction myself, but if you need an assist, I would rather see the community win, and we can work out a repayment plan later from within the DAO. So like if you're 10 ETH short, you can bid higher. And we got an offer like that from multiple whales. So as that started to get around, more confidence, we were only marketing this for a few days. And by the time we had 140 ETH, all those whales were like, I think you're good. I don't think you're going to need an assist. Yeah. And
that was without the whales.
That was without the whales. And so, yeah, that was 283 people, believing in an idea. And the other thing that was crazy about it is I was anticipating to do it, to like do the auction by phone from my home. But at the last minute, Bryce Allard, who's the methodical mammoth, wanted to surprise Sal DeGuardia for his birthday and fly me out to California. And I knew this was like terribly unmanageable to do during the auction, but it seemed like a good idea. So I went. I remember having the final strategy call outside the restaurant that we were eating at, talking about like, okay, which is our number one target? Like, what's our maximum bid? Like, what can we do? And that turned out to be the best decision in the world because I got to stay at Dorsey's place and do the auction live with Dorsey and Kathy and Sal all in the room. And that whole auction experience is still on my Instagram page. We streamed it live because that's what I did. So eventually we ended up being a very strong participant in the auction. The first lot, the Empathetic Elephant, was the only alpha drawing, the like non-8. It was not on an 8.5 by 11 page. It was a draft of the Empathy Elephant, and it closed for $330,000 before fees. But had we not been there, it would have closed at around $200,000.
Because you were bidding on that first.
Yeah, because it was the first lot. So like it. As proud as I am that we won the Gratitude Gorilla, I'm so proud that like because of us, we put an extra $100,000 in the Veefriends war chest. Like that's really like that's like real impact. And then the second lot was the Gratitude Gorilla, and we won it for $200K. So that day changed my life forever because we had a contingency if we didn't win. We could buy spec Veefriends, we could buy a CryptoPunk, we could do any number of things. But because we had a physical asset, like a lot of real things kicked into motion. It was like, okay, we need legal representation, we need an attorney, we need to like incorporate and do all the things the right way. So it took some time, but we did that. We're currently incorporated in Wyoming, and the gorilla is living in an art safe house in Delaware, and we're looking to basically, number one, tell that story and make it available so people can just enjoy. I told it okay right here, but there's so many twists and turns, and like, we also one thing that we did was we had people record themselves watching the auction. So we have like dozens of videos of people in the DAO, like sharing that win moment of like, oh my god, it happened. Yeah. So we really want to put out some content on that. But like any other company, now we need revenue streams. We have some liquidity in the vault, but it's hard to move a DAO forward. It's very hard to find consensus. It's very difficult to make sure everyone feels heard and is properly represented, when at the end of the day you need some degree of a centralized group to be making micro decisions operationally, moving the thing forward. Which is honestly a great transition into VDAO, because VDAO is the product of the VFamDAO, the Gorilla DAO, being a closed network. Just like legally, given the state of like the physical art piece and wanting to avoid any securities red flags or yet even yellow flags, once the vault was closed, it was closed. And it was moving very slowly, and there were hundreds of people in the Discord that were like, I missed the deadline, but I really want to participate in something like this. And that was when Cohen like really sort of brought to me an idea of, what if we had a DAO that was more focused on the community, where we, have a community vault and they govern that vault, but we're also providing value in the way of AMAs, in the way of just like a haven for collectors and for Veefriends. And that caught fire too. We didn't sell out, but we minted almost 2,000 tokens on launch, and And to this day is like, I think one of the most prominent Veefriends communities. You know, we are this Sunday. Later today. I'm hosting a space to announce a State of the Union for next week, where I'm planning to kind of give the coaches speech, which is like, I know everybody like sees me out in front, but like, I don't run this DAO. You run this DAO. Like, the only way that this thing grows, like if you're wondering like why there's not a lot of content coming out of VDAO, or like why we've been quiet, it's because we have like big roadmap items. It's like, take care of the community, make sure we have security and safety in our server, throw an event at VCon, and like make sure that the utilities that we have in the vault are being distributed out to holders. That's kind of the baseline. Everything else, all the bells and whistles, like, you know, social spaces and initiatives and artist incubation and all the ideas that we talk about have to come from an inspired holder base. And so I plan to spend the next week like really drumming up a lot of attention, and also communicating to people that like, there's an opportunity if you're wanting to create something within the DAO, and that there's like a really bright future for the VDAO, but it's not going to happen like watching from the sidelines.
Sure.
You know, because I personally can't really run the DAO anymore. I actually stepped down from my admin duties after VCon, which was kind of always the plan. But because I'm out in front, I think, and I helped found the thing, people assume that I'm like making these decisions, but I don't want to make decisions for the community. I just want to support them where they need support. So I know that was kind of a lot, but yeah.
So where the DAO is right now, like, what do you think it is going to take or needs to happen in order for it to get to a future state that you envision for it?
Look, I think the DAO as it is fine. I think it's providing value at a drip, and I think what members of the DAO have to decide is, are they comfortable with that? Like, at what pace do they want to grow, and what ambitions do they have? Because we achieved a lot of our goals. Like, the fact that we signed in 80 people to VCon is incredible. The fact that we mutually hold some Veefriends, and one of them is a FaceTime 5, and we get access to Gary this year for the community, like, that's a big win. But what I'm going to propose to the DAO is that VDAO should be the safest place to onboard into Web3. Simple. You know, everything else to me is a bonus. But other people may have different opinions, and like I said, it's not up to me.
Interesting.
So I guess the answer to your question is like, I think we need a refresh of moderators and admins. You know, I think over the course of a year, like, priorities change, markets change. You know, give people an opportunity to graciously step down if like they're not able to like maintain a commitment as moderator or whatever. Hopefully find people who are active now, who are interested in building something in a community that they can trust, that they know has like an established culture and is going somewhere. And then from that elected body, provide a platform for people where it's as easy as possible to get the resources they need, onboard friends that they're trying to like share NFTs with, and ultimately like just have a safe place, you know, where they like, if they're looking at a new mint, like they can check in and see like, hey, does everything look good here? Or they can get resources on how to mint NFTs or how to secure their vault or whatever that is. Like, I think the simplest answer to your question is getting the members of the DAO to agree on a minimum valuable product that will like sustain the culture, but also provide value, so that if people are wanting to mint a VDAO token for 0.05 ETH, they know what they're getting for that $100.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, community is so important, and like we've created a space where that is possible. In a space like Web3 where there's so many unknowns and so much changing all the time, right? And there are, even the community itself changes. People reprioritize where they spend their time, and other people start coming in and have new insights to learn from. And community is something we talk a lot about over the, like, I've been in Web3 for the last 2 years, we'll call it, and that's just been like the main buzzword, but also like key thing in a lot of community, or a lot of successful projects, right? So what's your perspective on community as it relates to Web3 versus, we'll say Web2, right? Like, I feel like community has always kind of been a thing, but it's not talked about as a level, like at the level of importance as it is in where we spend our time in Web3. So what's your perspective on it, community now, as it relates to what we're involved in?
This is a fun question because, like, I don't see a marketable difference. A remarkable difference?
Yeah.
I don't think it's really useful to compare and contrast the two. I think they have different attributes, but fundamentally they are the same. What I mean by that is a lot of communities are supported by the fact that they're financially incentivized to be strong communities. The things that really maintain long-term communities are the exact same with NFTs as they are without NFTs. It's feeling heard, being seen, being taken care of, being cared about. It's, I mean, like that's honestly like the baseline. Like that's what comes to mind. Like, what do people want more than to be loved and to be heard? And that's what, and so there is another layer, and the other layer is like the self-actualization of values that matter. So whether it's Veefriends or Bored Apes or Sappy Seals or any of these projects, like from a community perspective, setting aside the financial incentive and just accepting that like that is not what we're talking about. People want to see these values permeated through society. So I can support Veefriends because I believe that accountability is not taught properly today. And I think that the way that it's being presented by Veefriends is better. I think I can support Veefriends because I have personally experienced empathy lead to more fruitful experience, and I'm happy to support a character like Empathy Elephant. And I believe that the project like has a similar view of empathy as I do. 'Cause like, yeah, take away Web 2, take away Web 3. Like, think about just like the fundamental ways that humans organize. PFPs are are equivalent in my mind as like a sports jersey. I see you're wearing a Jets jersey. I'm wearing a Jets jersey. I know that we're both losers. Sorry, Gary. But I understand that like we have a shared interest, we have a shared passion. The same happened with like humans in like the earliest civilizations. Is like I wasn't there. I don't know, but like my understanding is like people self-selected for the most part, right? And I guess it gets very muddy because like throughout civilization we have caste systems, we have slavery, we have like so many things that like impeded a freedom of association between human beings. People are born into their circumstances. Like they like maybe an easier comparison is like nationalism, right? People believing in their government, people believing in the place that they hail from. I don't know. Why do we want America to be number one? Well, because if America's number one and I'm an American, then that must be good for me. That might not be how it actually plays out in the micro, but like that's the philosophy that happens when communities rally around an idea. And so I think people are inspired by ideas, and projects represent ideas. And then the dirt beyond that is actually just one-on-one. Like communities are supported by one-on-one connections. So I know I've gone in a lot of different places, but like if there is a difference between Web 2 communication and community and Web 3 community, it is the quality of the connection, and I think fundamentally they're the same. Yeah, I just think fundamentally they're the same. I don't know. Do you agree? Like, I know I went in a lot of places there.
I think it's that is true, or they should be. I don't see why there needs to be a difference. I think
Yes.
in the current state of Web3, they're, to your point, like, you're financially incentivized in a lot of cases to be a supportive community member. Not everybody is in it for those reasons, but a lot of people are, right? And I think
Yes.
over time we'll see that shake out to where a majority of people are in it because of the traditional senses of why you're in a community, right? Similar interests, similar values, like the things that you can contribute are valuable to everybody else, and the things that others contribute are valuable to you. So all the traditional senses of what a community is, whether it's a sports team or a like a book club or whatever else, right, where you have similar values and interests, I think that is always the case when it comes to community. But I think people just focus a lot more on it here because there's a lot less structure in the sense, or with Web 2 in the sense of like connecting with the community, right? Like we all work with the same big company and we all use their product. There's not a place for us to connect and talk about it outside of ones that we try and create versus
Right.
like, traditionally in Web 3, there's a Discord that opens up and we're all rallying around this one project and all trying to support it. And maybe that's the case right now because it helps financially sustain the project in a lot of circumstances. Early and immediately. But I don't know. I think there's little nuances, but holistically, I agree. They should be the same.
Here's another interesting thing is like I feel like the ways that communities are the way that the communities in Web3 feel like more concentrated and palpable is similar into the way that people rally around creators, artists, and filmmakers in the Web 2 world.
Yeah.
Because like if we both have an iPhone, like there's not much to like get excited about. Like yes, there are tech nerds, and yes, like we might have that connection. But if I met you at a bar, we're gonna have 100 other things to connect about beyond the fact that we both have iPhones. But if we both love Pulp Fiction, or we both love like Timothée Chalamet, you know, like creators, we see that as more of a model of like how these communities are organizing themselves now. And it makes sense because like what is the product? Like with iPhone, it's easy. Like it's this thing. But the product for these NFT companies is primarily the artwork and the community. I know everybody's trying to layer on utility and gamification and burn mechanics and everything else, but like the product is still the art in most situations. And the utility, like the most valuable utility is pretty much the community. You know, we haven't really seen a lot of companies be able to, if any, replicate the Yuga model and like provide airdrops with demand. So like there's a really long way to go before NFTs, I think, level out and like figure out what the actual use case that matters for a wider society is. But like even today, like we talk about mass adoption all the time. I saw Frank DeGod's retweet something from NFT statistics where they said that there are roughly 12,000 active wallets that spend 0.05 ETH daily. And that is down from 40,000 active wallets at the peak.
That's all that.
If like people are talking about onboarding millions, but if you onboarded 100,000 new people, you would 10x the entire community. So, like just for context, and like how many followers does Beyonce have? Like Beyonce is basically the Yuga Labs of female icons, female divas, right? So like there's a huge delta from here to there, and I think while I completely agree, like people gathered themselves around values and interests and ideas. We also love a hero story. We love to like celebrate each other, and that's why art is popping off in the space right now, because that's talent.
Yeah.
And then the community is like, we share the love of this style, of this person, of this art. And that's way more sustainable than loving the value of my token.
I will say that like I've never understood art and really vibed with art and like tried to understand it until I got into this space. And it's because things like I saw, okay, there's like art projects and I see the value of, you know, now we're having debates about royalties and stuff, but like artists being able to ultimately still create viable careers with this stuff, right? And obviously art blocks being a big proponent in that with gen art and leveraging code as a medium, which has like always been the thing, but being able to do it on chain and immutably there's something beautiful about that. And like the level of detail it takes to really be able to on demand generate something that tells a great compelling story and invokes emotion. And something about mixing art and the tech clicked for me, and I started to understand, okay, this is actually really neat. And I mean, obviously in the bear market we've seen them significantly outperform in terms of demand, like any other project really, and actually sustain what people value them at. But it's been really neat to see like a whole new set of creators be valued and rallied around and praised for what they're doing and how they're bringing value to the rest of the communities.
I totally agree. And I think it's also like a testament to the fact that opportunity is right on the table. Like to kind of bring it back to like taking action. When you take the risk to like put your work out there, put your voice out there, put your podcast out there, people want to see you succeed. There will be people who like want to see you fail, but there's way more people that want to see you succeed. Like something that happened very early on, just by the sheer fact that I posted for a week, like people were like, "Hey, can I make you a logo?" You know, seems like you need a logo, like that kind of thing. The serendipity of generosity and camaraderie, I think, is very real, and people should not like look at the space or like the valuations of various artists and compare it to their own and think, oh, I'm not gonna hit, because like I know this is cliche, but like look at Picasso. Like Picasso didn't really like take off until after his death, and I hope you don't have to wait that long. But like you also have like an entire like supercomputer in your pocket, and like you can share your work around the world for the cost of internet. So like getting started and building that community and telling a compelling story and creating something that you actually care about is it's always going to be a good idea, but it's like especially it's a very special opportunity now in NFTs where only the most like diehard are still around. I think there's probably still another shakeout coming before the next bull, but like the people who are here now, like they want to find the good stuff. They want to be a part of the history. They want to build it.
And they want to, to your point, they want to see other people succeed. They want to help in any way that they can. Like we are all rallying around each other, and it's a really cool moment to be a part of it. Yeah.
I can tell you're trying to wrap this up. You don't have to, but I have a question for you before we close.
All right,
because I asked Twitter if there was any questions that you should ask me, and I thought this one from Davey was really good, and I wanna read it proper, where he said, ethics and best practices re Twitter engagement farming.
Yeah.
And I think it matters in the context of community too, because we're in the attention economy. These projects live and die by the amount of attention they have on Twitter. But there's also like a whole like segment of Twitter that is just constantly engagement farming for no reason. What is like your perspective of that, and do you think Do you think projects should engagement farm their community just to stay relevant, or should they only post when they have like valuable updates to share?
So I saw that post, I saw the comment, I saw your response, and we can talk about it a little bit. Because when I see engagement farming, it drives me up a wall. You see it a ton on LinkedIn, you see it all over Twitter, and it's always the same people, right?
Yes.
And they have a great hook sometimes that'll pull you in, and then it's just like engagement farm. Or sometimes it's just whatever the trend of farming for that week or day is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I believe that when you post something, a lot of the time it should be trying to contribute value, because that's how you build a community that like actually wants to be a part of your community and part of your story, wants to help. They see you're contributing value to the space. And I think that's significantly more valuable when you're building something long-term and meaningful than just getting, I have 100,000 followers because I told people that I was going to do this giveaway that I'm actually not going to do, and you have to follow, retweet, like, comment, share, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't build a loyal community like Gary has done without putting the level of value out with at no ask in return like Gary has done over the last decade, right? But that's a long-term view, and not everybody has the stomach for that. They want things now. They want to be the big followed person now. But if you are that person and then you go and put out a product, right, you actually ask for something in return, your returns are going to be significantly lower than if you actually have a community that wants to support you. And like, again, if you're constantly putting out value, I imagine whatever you're now selling or offering is probably valuable too. I hope it is.
Yes.
Right? And so then like you've just continued to reinforce that belief in your of yourself from other people because you're sticking to that. Versus this guy just like engagement farms and whatever else. Like, I'll never buy anything from any of those people. I'll never like go out of my way to support any of those people. Like, I follow a couple of them because occasionally they put stuff out, but like I think the bulk of things should be like value focused, trying to give. It's a 51-49 kind of conversation.
Yes.
But at the same time, like, I think you can still put out stuff that's on your mind. It doesn't have to be always like, how do I give value? Because you can only give so much, especially if, you know, you're earlier in your career and your experience and whatever else, right?
Yes.
I think there's other ways of like just having good conversation and putting your 2 cents in. I think commenting is awesome on other people's posts.
It's way better than engagement farming. Like,
100%.
adding a thoughtful comment is
just
100 times better.
It's just as effective, and people see your PFP and your name come up over and over and over again in all these different communities, and they're like, oh man, like this guy's always in there. In the same way that you did it, where you found people asking questions about Veefriends, and people started to associate you with those types of conversations because you were always in them, right? And you didn't build a community by engagement farming. You built it by like trying to contribute value where you could at each stage of your path. And so I think there's other ways to get similar results in terms of engagement, but I think there's a lot more sustainable and effective ways of building a community. And I don't consider it building a community if you build it solely off of engagement farming. So that's my long-winded 2 cents answer.
I know. I think that's a solid answer. I agree. There's a bit of a like the boy who cried wolf problem, where it's like if everything you tweet is just like basic farming engagement, which has minimal value. If we can say that everything has some degree of value, but it's like, are you really providing anything original or inspiring or informational, educational? No. But at the same time, there is kind of a middle ground. And I think like asking this question from an ethical point of view is interesting, because if you don't stay relevant on people's algorithms, it doesn't matter how valuable your content is, you won't reach your audience. Right. And this is kind of like where I struggle, where I don't tend to hop on these bandwagons, and it really depends on what the bandwagon is, but it's almost better for me to participate in the topic of the day share the copy pasta or comment on the hot collection and farm that engagement because people are engaging with that content, and so the algorithm is feeding people more tweets in that direction. So as to stay relevant, so when I do have something important to say, the algorithm's like, oh, you liked that person's tweet last time, here it is again. Because what I have found is that yeah, the algorithm's just not very good at knowing what's valuable,
I agree, because you could put out the most valuable clips, podcasts, tweets, whatever, but if no one's watching it, like, you're not providing value to anyone, right? Unless they go and find your historic documents.
Yeah, except for like the hopeful 2037 audience
which is fine, but I think at that point it just comes down to intention. What is your
1,000%, and that's basically what I said to Davey. I was like,
behind it?
Do what feels right.
Because you're doing, like, I get notifications of every tweet you send out, and so I still don't feel like I consider you anybody who farms engagement. I've seen some of the tweets. I get what you're saying, and that's doing it strategically so you can make sure that when you put out something valuable, which happens more frequently than not, it is being seen. People are receiving that value, and now they're like, okay, I want to follow this guy because like he has good thoughts around these things, or I want to stay up to date with Veefriends or whatever else. So I agree. I think that comes down to intent.
So let's provide a little value and answer the question, how do you provide value?
I think that's individual, like based off of your individual person. Like what are your expertise? Where can you provide value? Whether it's, hey, I'm somebody who knows a lot of people, and I see somebody has a problem, and I know somebody else who can solve that problem, and hell, maybe he even owes me a favor. It's like, let me make that introduction. Let's help you out, right? Like your example earlier of, oh, hey, like I go and make logos. Think you need a logo. Can I make one for you? Right?
Yes.
Or let me give you some advice on legal, right? Like, what's your area of expertise, or where do you know people in those levels of expertise? And just always being open-minded to being kind, like, and not expecting anything in return. That's the biggest piece, right? Like, I don't give, and
great
I'm going to hold it over your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, in my experience, that almost bears more fruit than expecting something in return. Like, I'll do this for you if you do this for me, right?
Totally.
And because people want to help you. And, like, I feel bad that in some circumstances I feel like I've taken more than I've given, and it makes me want to find ways to give. So whether that's, hey, I'm a good communicator, so I want to find a way I can take something complex and dumb it down. So that's a great skill set when it comes to education. Let me find ways to educate people on Web3, right? A complex situation. I'm doing that in my day-to-day with art blocks and meeting with big organizations that are like, what the heck is an NFT? What's the blockchain? How do we use this? And educating them not only on what it is, but like, here's everything you shouldn't do, or the reasons you shouldn't do it. These are the reasons where it could be valuable to everybody in your community, right? And like, if you can go into it with that intent, happy to work with you. If not, like, this isn't going to be a good fit. And so I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but at the end of the day,
that's awesome.
It's down to the individual. Like, ask yourself where you can provide value. What are the things I'm good at that maybe other people need help with? And I think it's just keeping your eye out for it, because the more you give, like, you always get stuff in return. Again, don't do it for that, but like, there's a serendipity aspect of it where it just kind of happens.
Yeah, it's karma.
And you build a brand around like just being kind, and it's a big part of why I love the Veefriends community. And I think that's probably why I feel like I've received more than I've given, is because it's so hard to keep up, because everybody wants to give.
For sure. Dude, I totally felt that way for a while where, it was probably around the DAO stuff, and people were like throwing me so many flowers and like, telling me, oh, I'm going to get you a drink at VCon or this and that thing. And I was like, I really gotta put out some more content so I can like rebalance the scales. But I really love that answer, and I've more recently kind of like broadened my view of value, because I think I think you're right that it ultimately comes down to the individual and the individual on the other side. Like, value is received one person at a time, one content piece at a time. And broadly, I would define the categories as like education, entertainment, escapism, and utility.
Yes.
You know, it's like if I'm teaching somebody how to stay safe with their wallet security, that's hugely valuable. If I'm singing on a Twitter Spaces or interviewing someone, that might be edutainment, entertainment and education. Or the utility of like, I know this is going to be a gateway to this thing, gives me access, allow lists, or just simple like the utility of like knowing that I can get caught up on Veefriends in the podcast. The podcast is all three of those in that way. But I've also broadened or even like softened recently to think that being present is valuable. Like and holding space is very valuable. Like I could do absolutely nothing. I could host a Twitter Spaces and not say a word and just allow other people to speak, and I think that's hugely valuable. Because, well, I guess because there are not enough spaces of that in the real world, you know, and like, and sometimes people just need a little permission to kind of get started in that journey. But like the more and more I see, like there's somebody in the VDAO and in my community who for sure has tweet notifications on. He's like the first person to like and share most of my tweets. And today I just gave him one of my tokens, my Jeremy Knows tokens, because I was like, dude, you've been the number one to like my tweets for months and months and months. Like you're the number one reply guy. You deserve a token. And that's kind of like that serendipitous value, but like that means a lot, and it just shows that like it can manifest in various ways. I don't know what I did to make him like be such a fervent supporter, and someday he may completely move on, but like for the time being, like that's a really nice two-way street, and I have to assume like there's some sense of like almost living vicariously through me. I think there are a lot of people who like they want to start their content journey, or they maybe even have started because they saw me get through that awkward phase and gave them another sense of belief that they could do it too. So like being present in that way of just like documenting, sharing, letting it be honest and messy is also valuable.
Being present is something that can be really tough when there's a lot going on. It's something that I've struggled with, and I'm always trying to keep top of mind of when I'm doing what I'm doing, especially when it involves other people. How can I make sure that I'm here and not thinking about what I just came from or what I need to do next? Because there's such a difference when you're present, especially with other people, in the relationship that gets built, the conversation that gets had, and I mean, just the amount of, to your point, value that comes out of it in both directions too. So it's something that everyone should always try to keep top of mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, Jeremy, we got to wrap up. I appreciate your
this
time.
Is a blast.
I could literally talk to you for hours, but you already
we'll do it
know
again.
That.
Yeah,
we'll definitely do it again. Where can people find you? What should people be looking out for?
My brand Unison is a long way off. Jeremy Knows on Spotify and podcast, on Twitter, and on TikTok and Instagram. I'm wannabe a Veefriend. I've been very reluctant to change that to Jeremy Knows. It's like I've got to figure this out. But
there's a sentimental aspect, I'm sure.
I'm also, but more and more, I'm leading with Jeremy Knows. Like I'm Jeremy Knows on LinkedIn. I actually just started on Whatnot, which is another streaming service, but it has an integrated marketplace. I'm Jeremy Knows there. I think I'm also Jeremy Knows on Medium and everywhere. If you search Jeremy Knows Veefriends, you should be able to find my thing. But also just go to info.jeremyknows.com. That's where I have all the information about, like, to my podcast, to my text message service, to my NFT. and I'm working on like putting more resources there as well.
Perfect. And I'll put all of the links in the description. There'll be plenty, I'm sure.
Thanks. Appreciate that. I'll try to send them to you so you don't have to hunt them down.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. It's been Beat Around the Blockchain, episode number 13, with the one and only Jeremy Knows. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.